I was 28 when I moved back to my hometown after my startup collapsed in Seattle. It was a tough decision, but I needed to regroup. My family, especially my Aunt Gloria, had always been supportive, or so I thought. I was optimistic about this fresh start until I received that accidental video message. In just 3 minutes, I heard words that shattered everything I believed about my family's love and respect for me. Before I get into this life-changing story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever had family members talk behind your back. Trust me, what happened next will shock you as much as it shocked me. Growing up in Oak Ridge, a small Midwest town, my family had always placed enormous value on traditional success. My father, Thomas, was the respected high school principal, known for his strict discipline and high expectations. Everyone in town knew him as the man who turned around a failing school through sheer determination and rigid standards. At home, those same standards applied to his children. My mother, Diane, built her identity around being a top real estate agent in our region. She specialized in luxury properties and cultivated relationships with the wealthiest families in 3 counties. Image was everything to her. The right car, the right clothes, the right connections. She was charming and polished in public, exhausted and critical at home. Then there was my younger sister, Zoe, 4 years my junior, and the undisputed pride of the family. She was currently in her 3rd year of medical school at Johns Hopkins, following the path my parents had originally wanted for me. Whenever local newspapers featured hometown success stories, Zoe was invariably mentioned, while my tech career barely warranted acknowledgement. The only person who seemed to truly see me was my Aunt Gloria, my mother's younger sister. Unlike Diane, Gloria had never cared about status or appearances. She taught art at the community college, lived in a small house filled with books and pottery, and had been divorced twice. My mother often referred to her life choices as unfortunate, but to me, Gloria represented authenticity. Throughout my childhood, she was the one who encouraged my interest in computers and coding, buying me programming books, when my father insisted I should focus on biology and chemistry instead. I had actually done well in college, graduating with honors in computer science from the University of Illinois. My parents attended my graduation, but spent most of the ceremony talking about how these skills could still be useful if I decided to grow up and apply to medical school. Instead, I accepted a job at a prestigious tech company in Seattle, which they reluctantly acknowledged as at least a stable career. For 3 years, I built a solid reputation in the industry. I saved money, learned everything I could, and eventually took the biggest risk of my life, leaving security behind to join a startup with 2 former colleagues. We had a revolutionary idea for streamlining small business operations through an integrated platform. For 18 glorious months, everything seemed perfect. We secured initial funding, built a working prototype, and started gaining attention in the tech community. I called home with excitement, finally feeling like I was creating something meaningful. My father said it sounded interesting, but reminded me to keep my resume updated. Then, everything fell apart spectacularly. Our major investor pulled out at the last minute before our second round of funding. Desperate to keep the dream alive, I poured my entire savings into the company. We worked around the clock to salvage things, but then came the technical issues during our product launch. A major security flaw was discovered. Fixing it drained our remaining resources, and within 2 months we had to declare bankruptcy. I lost everything: my savings, my apartment, and worst of all, my confidence. At 28, I found myself with no choice but to move back to my hometown. My parents offered their guest room until I got back on my feet, which they emphasized should be as soon as possible. The welcome was warm on the surface, with my mother preparing my favorite childhood meals and my father offering a temporary position helping with IT at his school. But there was an underlying tension in every interaction, a sense that I had confirmed their worst fears about my career path. Despite this, I was determined to rebuild. I started applying for remote tech positions, updated my portfolio website, and reconnected with former colleagues. I also relied heavily on my weekly coffee meetings with Aunt Gloria, who listened without judgment as I processed the failure and planned my next steps. Failure is just expensive education, she would say, sharing stories of her own setbacks after her divorces. The people who never fail are the ones who never try anything worth doing. When my mother's birthday approached, Gloria suggested I attend the family gathering as a chance to remind everyone of my capabilities beyond the recent setback. Talk about your skills, not your struggles, she advised. And remember that your worth is not measured by a bank account or a business card. I felt ready to face the extended family armed with Gloria's wisdom and a few promising job leads to discuss. I had no idea that this birthday party would be the setting for the most painful revelation of my life. I arrived at my parents' house 2 hours early to help set up for my mother's birthday celebration. Their colonial-style home looked immaculate as always, with freshly planted flowers lining the walkway and new decorative flags announcing "Welcome, friends" by the front door. I parked my beat-up Toyota far down the driveway, knowing my mother would prefer the guests not see it upon arrival. Inside, my father was arranging chairs in the living room, while my mother directed the catering staff in the kitchen. She brightened when she saw me, though her eyes quickly darted to the wrinkled shirt I had grabbed from my suitcase. "Salvador, darling, so glad you could help. There are ironed shirts in your father's closet if you want to change before people arrive," she said, kissing my cheek. I swallowed my pride and changed my shirt. Over the next hour, relatives began to arrive. Aunt Karen and Uncle Frank came first, my father's older brother and his wife, who owned a successful chain of hardware stores. They greeted me with the awkward enthusiasm people reserve for those they pity. "So, Salvador, back in town for a while?" Uncle Frank clapped my shoulder too hard. "Sometimes we need to step back and reassess. No shame in that." "Actually, I have several promising opportunities lined up," I replied, the rehearsed line sounding hollow even to me. "Well, there is always work in our stores if you need something stable," he offered his tone, making clear what he thought of my tech career. More relatives arrived, and I kept busy refilling drinks and directing people to the food table. Each conversation followed a similar pattern. Cautious questions about my plans thinly veiled, suggestions for more practical career paths, and quick subject changes when I mentioned potential remote work opportunities. My sister Zoe arrived fashionably late, bringing an expensive-looking gift and stories from medical school. The family gathered around her instantly, giving me a welcome break from the spotlight. I watched as my parents beamed with pride, my father's hand on Zoe's shoulder, as she described a complicated procedure she had observed. My mother kept saying, "That is our daughter, the future doctor," to anyone within earshot. Throughout the evening, I noticed Aunt Gloria making pointed efforts to highlight my abilities. "Salvador built my website for the art department, and enrollment increased 30%, she announced during dinner. "He has talents most of us cannot even understand." A few people nodded politely before returning to their conversations about Zoe's medical school achievements and Uncle Frank's new store location. I caught my father exchanging a look with my mother, something between annoyance and embarrassment. By 9 o'clock, I had reached my limit. I approached my mother, kissed her cheek, and made an excuse about a deadline for a potential contract. She seemed almost relieved as she said, "Of course, work should be your priority right now." I hugged Zoe, waved to Gloria, and slipped out while the party continued. The next morning, I woke to a notification on my phone, new video message from Gloria. This was unusual. My aunt rarely sent videos, preferring calls or texts. Still groggy, I tapped the notification without much thought. The video started with a shaky view of my parents' living room. I recognized it as the scene from last night, but now the party had dwindled to just family members. The phone appeared to be accidentally recording from a position on the coffee table, partially obscured by a napkin, but with a clear audio feed. I realized immediately that Gloria had not meant to send this to me. I should have stopped watching. Something in my gut told me to. Instead, I turned up the volume. "Well, that was mercifully brief," my father's voice came through clearly. "I thought Salvador would never leave." My blood ran cold as I realized they were talking about me. "Thomas, he is trying," my mother said, though her tone lacked conviction. "Trying. He has been trying for months now," my father continued. "Almost 30 years old, living in our guest room with nothing to show for his so-called career but a failed business and debt. I hate to say it, but Salvador is becoming a pathetic failure." The words hit me like a physical blow. Pathetic failure, from my own father's mouth. "The neighbors keep asking about him," my mother added. "It is embarrassing to explain why a man his age is living at home again. He lacks real-world skills." Uncle Frank's voice joined in. All that computer knowledge, but no drive. No commitment to seeing things through. Maybe he needs some tough love, suggested someone off camera, possibly our family friend, Dr. Williams. Sometimes these creative types need a reality check. The camera shook slightly, and I could see Aunt Gloria's hand reach for it before pausing. I think you are all being unfair, she said, her defense sounding weak even to my ears. Salvador has talents. His business failing was not entirely his fault. Not entirely, no, my father replied sarcastically. Just mostly his poor judgment and lack of practical thinking. The conversation continued for another excruciating minute, with various family members offering their assessments of my shortcomings. My sister Zoe sat silently in the corner, looking uncomfortable but offering no defense. The video ended abruptly as Gloria finally realized her phone was recording. Seconds later, a text message appeared. Sorry, wrong person. I sat frozen on my bed, unable to process what I had just witnessed. My stomach lurched, and I barely made it to the bathroom before becoming physically ill. When I returned to my phone, I saw 3 missed calls from Gloria. I turned off my phone and curled back into bed, my mind replaying those devastating words on loop. Pathetic failure. That is what my family truly thought of me. Not someone going through a temporary setback. Not someone with potential who needed support. A pathetic failure. For 3 days, I avoided my family completely. I left the house before anyone woke up and returned after everyone was asleep. My phone accumulated missed calls and concerned text messages that I could not bring myself to answer. From my father, we need to discuss your job search progress. From my mother, are you coming to dinner tonight? From Gloria, please call me. We need to talk. From Zoe, everything okay? Parents are asking about you. I spent my days at the local library using their internet to apply for jobs and pretending to be productive while my mind kept returning to that video. I watched it dozens more times, analyzing every word, every tone, every facial expression visible in the frame. Each viewing twisted the knife deeper. On the 4th day, I finally responded to Gloria, agreeing to meet at a coffee shop downtown, rather than her usual suggestion of her home. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where we would not be overheard by anyone from town. When Gloria walked in, she looked like she had not slept in days. Her normally vibrant appearance was subdued, her eyes red-rimmed behind her glasses. She sat down across from me without ordering anything. Salvador, I am so sorry, she began, her voice cracking. I never meant for you to see that. That is obvious, I replied, surprising myself with how calm I sounded despite the storm inside me. But I did see it, and I heard everything. They do not really feel that way, she said, though her eyes betrayed her words. They were just frustrated and venting. Do not lie to me, I said quietly. Not now. Not after everything. We both know that what people say when they think no one is listening is what they truly believe. Gloria's eyes filled with tears. I should have defended you better. Yes, you should have. I felt a strange power in stating this truth plainly. You have been my biggest supporter my entire life, or so I thought. But in that room when it mattered, your defense was half-hearted at best. They have been talking about you like this for months, she admitted, looking down at her untouched coffee. I thought if I stayed in their good graces, I could gradually change their minds. Show them your potential in ways they would accept. This revelation hit almost as hard as the video itself. Months. They had been discussing me like this for months, and the one person I trusted most had been part of those conversations. I need to know everything I said. Every criticism, every comment, every plan they have discussed about me. For the next hour, Gloria laid bare the full extent of my family's disappointment. My father had been telling colleagues I was taking a sabbatical rather than admit my business had failed. My mother had been introducing me at church as just visiting rather than acknowledge I was living at home. There had even been talk of staging an intervention to convince me to go back to school for something practical like accounting. I listened without interruption, each word cementing my new understanding of my place in the family. When Gloria finally ran out of confessions, I stood up. Thank you for your honesty, I said mechanically. I will not keep you any longer. What are you going to do? She asked, real fear in her voice. I do not know yet, I answered truthfully. But I will not be where I am not wanted or respected. That night, I considered my options. My first instinct was to leave town immediately. I researched cheap apartments in cities across the country, calculating how long my meager savings would last while job hunting. I even started packing a suitcase ready to disappear before sunrise. But as the night deepened, something shifted inside me. I found myself thinking about patterns that had existed my entire life, my constant striving for approval that never fully came, my willingness to diminish my own dreams, to avoid disappointment, my habit of apologizing for choices I actually believed in. I had been playing a rigged game, seeking validation from people who had already decided I would never measure up. Around 3 in the morning, I checked my email out of habit and noticed something I had missed during my days of emotional turmoil, a message from a former client from my startup days. They were launching a new project and needed a web developer with exactly my skill set. They wanted to know if I was available for freelance work with the possibility of ongoing contracts. It was like the universe had thrown me a lifeline exactly when I needed it most. I stayed up until dawn, converting my bedroom into a makeshift office and crafting a detailed proposal. By breakfast time, I had responded to the client with a comprehensive plan, professional rate sheet, and portfolio of relevant work. By lunchtime, they had accepted my proposal with a contract and deposit to follow. This small victory gave me the clarity I needed. I would not run away, but I would not stay in my parents' house another day longer than necessary. I would rebuild my life, but on my terms, not theirs. And I would confront my family, but only when I was standing on ground of my own making. Over the next week, I threw myself into 2 parallel tracks, building my new freelance business and finding my own place to live. I reconnected with every contact in my network, updated my LinkedIn profile, and created a new business website showcasing my skills. I also scoured rental listings, calculating budgets, and visiting potential apartments. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. The local bookstore downtown had a small apartment above it that the owner, Jackson, was looking to rent. When he learned I was a web developer, he offered a discount on rent in exchange for helping modernize the store's website and inventory system. It was perfect, affordable, independent, and came with a built-in first client for my portfolio. I signed the lease and paid the deposit the same day, using the funds from my first freelance project. For the first time since the startup collapse, I felt a sense of agency returning. This was not the success I had originally envisioned, but it was a path forward that belonged entirely to me. The day I moved out, my parents were blindsided. I had not mentioned my plans, working silently while they were at work and moving my essential belongings in small batches. "This is a rash decision," my father said when I announced I was leaving. "You cannot afford to live independently right now." "Actually, I can," I replied calmly. "I have secured freelance work and arranged affordable housing. But you have not discussed any of this with us," my mother said, looking genuinely hurt. "We could have helped you plan properly." "I needed to do this myself," I said simply. My sister Zoe, home for the weekend, offered to help move my remaining things. As we loaded boxes into my car, she finally spoke about the elephant in the room. "I saw the video Gloria sent you," she admitted quietly. "She told me what happened. And you did not say anything, in the video or after." I could not keep the hurt from my voice. "I was a coward," she said, meeting my eyes directly. "I did not agree with them, but I was afraid to speak up. I have spent my whole life being the good child, the one who meets expectations. I did not know how to defend you without risking that identity." Her honesty was unexpected and disarming. "I understand," I said, realizing that I did. My sister had been trapped in her own version of family dynamics, playing a role that came with its own pressures. That first night in my new apartment was both terrifying and liberating. The space was small, just a bedroom, tiny kitchen, and living area with sloped ceilings. The furniture was minimal, a mattress on the floor, a desk I had constructed from an old door and sawhorses, and a single comfortable chair I had splurged on for working. But it was mine, paid for by my work, independent from family approval. I slept better than I had in months. Over the following weeks, I established a new routine centered entirely around rebuilding my life. I woke early, worked on client projects until mid-afternoon, then spent time networking and seeking new opportunities. I kept my overhead low and reinvested most of my earnings into better equipment and professional development courses. Through persistence and word of mouth, I landed 3 more clients. One was a local restaurant needing a complete website overhaul. Another was a startup in Chicago that needed help with user interface design. The third was a nonprofit organization looking to improve their donation platform. None were large accounts, but together they provided stable income and valuable additions to my portfolio. I also focused on rebuilding a social life independent from my family connections. I reconnected with old friends from high school who had also returned to our hometown after time away. Many were struggling with their own versions of adjusted expectations and family pressures. We formed an informal support network meeting weekly at the local brewery to share leads, advice, and encouragement. Perhaps most importantly, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martin, who specialized in family dynamics. Our weekly sessions helped me process not just the video incident, but the lifetime of subtle messages that had shaped my self-perception. Your family created a narrative about you long ago, Dr. Martin explained during one session. When you deviated from that narrative, they experienced it as a rejection of their values rather than an expression of your own. But I never meant to reject them, I protested. I just wanted to follow my own path. And that is precisely what healthy adults do, she replied. The problem lies not in your choices, but in their inability to separate their identity from your achievements. These insights did not erase the pain, but they helped me contextualize it. I began to understand that my parents' criticism reflected their own fears and limited perspectives more than any objective truth about my worth or potential. For almost a month, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Brief texts assuring them I was alive and well, but nothing more. Gloria continued to reach out, and eventually I agreed to meet her for coffee again. Her relief was palpable as she updated me on family news and expressed genuine interest in my new projects. I was cordial, but guarded, unwilling to rush back into trust that had been so fundamentally broken. Finally, after 6 weeks of independence, I accepted an invitation to Sunday dinner at my parents' house. I prepared mentally drafting talking points and rehearsing calm responses to potential criticism. I even wrote out a speech addressing the video directly, though I suspected I might never deliver it. I arrived precisely on time, no longer feeling the need to come early and help prepare. My mother greeted me with a careful hug, noting that I looked well. My father shook my hand formally, as if I were a colleague rather than his son. Zoe was there too, having come home specifically for this dinner, a buffer and bridge between worlds. We made it through appetizers with superficial conversation about weather and local news. It was during the main course that my father finally broached the subject of my new living situation. That apartment above the bookstore cannot be very spacious, he commented, and freelance work is notoriously unstable. I worry this is another impulsive decision. In the past, this would have triggered my defensiveness or efforts to justify my choices. Instead, I calmly took out my phone, pulled up my business website, and passed it to him. This is what I have built in the past 6 weeks, I said as he scrolled through the professional design and client testimonials. I have 5 active contracts and 2 more pending. My income now exceeds what I made at entry level at my first tech job. My mother peered over his shoulder, visibly surprised by the polished presentation. This looks very professional, Salvador. It is professional, I said simply, because I am a professional. Then, deciding the moment was right, I added quietly, I am not a pathetic failure. The table went silent. My father's head snapped up from the phone and my mother's face drained of color. Zoe looked down at her plate while Gloria, who had been invited at my request, reached for her water glass with a shaking hand. I never said, my father began. You did, I interrupted, keeping my voice level. In the video, Gloria accidentally sent me the night of Mom's birthday party. I heard everything all of you said about me after I left. The stunned silence that followed confirmed everything. There were no indignant denials, no claims of misunderstanding. They knew exactly what I had heard. Salvador, we were frustrated, my mother finally said. We did not mean. I think you did mean it, I replied. And that is actually okay. You are entitled to your opinions about my choices. What I realized is that I do not need to shape my life around earning your approval. What followed was possibly the first honest conversation our family had ever had. There were awkward apologies and uncomfortable admissions. My father acknowledged that his rigid definition of success came from his own father's criticism. My mother confessed that her obsession with appearances stemmed from insecurity about her own background. Later that evening, I found myself alone in the kitchen with my father as I helped clear dishes. He stood beside me at the sink, awkwardly drying plates I had washed. "I always wanted certainty for you," he said finally. "A clear path. Medicine law, something established. When you chose technology and startups, all I could see was risk." "The world has changed, Dad," I replied. "The stable career paths you valued are not the only routes to security anymore." I am beginning to see that he admitted. "Your website.it was impressive. You have skills I do not understand, and that has been difficult for me to accept." It was not a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. My mother found me next, cornering me in the hallway before I could leave. Her eyes were red from crying. "I want you to know something," she said urgently. "When I talked about being embarrassed, it was never really about you. It was about me not knowing how to answer questions, not having the perfect story to tell. I was afraid, not disappointed." I nodded, not quite ready to offer absolution, but acknowledging her attempt at honesty. Zoe walked me to my car, the night air cool around us. "I am sorry I did not stand up for you," she said, "both that night and all the times before." "We were both playing the roles we thought we had to play," I replied. "Not anymore," she said with a small smile. "Watching you break free has made me question some of my own choices, too." Aunt Gloria was the last to approach me, waiting until I was about to drive away. "I betrayed your trust," she said directly. "I should have been your advocate without compromise." "Yes," I agreed. "But you are also the one who always saw something in me worth encouraging. I have not forgotten that." 6 months later, my freelance business was thriving. I had hired 2 part-time developers to help with the workload and moved to a larger apartment in town. My relationship with my family had found a new equilibrium, not the unquestioning closeness of before, but something more authentic. We had learned to respect boundaries and acknowledge differences without the undercurrent of disapproval that had previously defined our interactions. Most importantly, I had discovered an unexpected passion for mentoring other young developers who had experienced setbacks. The local community college invited me to teach an evening course on web development, and I started a small monthly meetup for tech entrepreneurs in our region. My failure had become the foundation for a different kind of success, one built on resilience, authenticity, and self-acceptance. That accidental video had been excruciating to watch, but it ultimately forced a reckoning that had been necessary for years. It stripped away pretense and forced us all to confront the gap between appearance and reality in our family dynamic. The pain of that moment became the catalyst for building a life on my own terms, one where others' opinions no longer determined my worth. Have you ever had a painful moment of truth that ultimately changed your life for the better? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult moments. Remember that sometimes the most hurtful revelations can lead to the most authentic path forward. Thank you for listening, and I wish you the courage to define success on your own terms, whatever that looks like for you.